The sensor arrays went crazy at 3 in the morning ship time. Liara jumped from her bunk, scales rippling with confusion as every alarm system screamed warnings she had never heard before. Her science vessel, the Wandering Light, had spent 2 years mapping dead zones in the outer regions. Nothing lived out here. Nothing should be sending signals. She rushed to the control deck, her twin hearts pounding. The display showed an energy signature that made no sense. It pulsed like a heartbeat, strong and steady, coming from a location her charts marked as empty space around a dying red giant star. "Computer, verify readings," she said, her voice tight. Readings confirmed. Unknown energy source detected. Pattern suggests artificial origin. Age of signal, 3,217 years. Liara felt her throat go dry. 3,000 years. That was before the Galactic Union existed, before her people had left their home world. She changed course immediately, knowing this discovery could mean everything or nothing. The journey took 6 hours. As the Wandering Light approached, her screens finally showed what her sensors had found. A structure hung in the void, massive and ancient, built from materials that seemed to absorb light. It looked like a flower made of crystal and metal, its petals closed around a central core. The entire station rotated slowly, generating its own gravity. Symbols covered its surface. Liara recognized some as Proto-Centaurian, others as extinct languages from civilizations long gone. One set of markings made her pause. They were in a script her university professors had called Human Standard, from the mysterious species that had vanished before anyone else reached the stars. She docked carefully, her hands shaking. The station accepted her ship like it had been waiting. Airlocks aligned perfectly. Atmosphere readings showed breathable air inside, somehow maintained for millennia. The interior corridors were dark but functional. Emergency lighting activated as she walked, creating a path deeper into the structure. Everything was built for beings slightly taller than her, with strange artistic touches. Images on the walls showed a blue and green planet, beings with 2 arms and 2 legs, ships that looked primitive compared to modern vessels. The trail of lights led her to a central chamber so large her breath caught. At its heart stood a transparent crystal column, 20 meters tall, filled with swirling energy. Inside that column, suspended in impossible stasis, floated a human. He looked young, maybe 30 cycles if her xenobiology courses were accurate. Dark hair, closed eyes, wearing a suit covered in technology she could not identify. Tubes and wires connected him to the station itself, his body perfectly preserved, chest rising and falling in slow, deliberate breaths. Liara approached slowly, hardly daring to believe it. A living human, the first anyone had seen in 3,000 years. A hologram flickered to life beside the column. A human woman appeared, wearing strange clothing, her expression kind but serious. "Greetings," the hologram said in perfect galactic standard. "I am Dr. Yuki Tanaka, or at least a preserved copy of her consciousness. If you are seeing this, the Guardian Protocol has activated. The sleeper will wake soon. You need to understand what is about to happen." "Guardian Protocol," Liara whispered. 3,000 years ago, humanity received a warning from beings we barely understood. They told us about a threat that destroys civilizations from within, a force that feeds on fear and spreads through the spaces between stars. They called it the Silence. The hologram gestured to the sleeping man. "This is Robert Hayes. We placed him here, enhanced with technology beyond what we should have possessed, to serve as a watchman. His neural patterns were altered to make him immune to the Silence's effects. When the threat returned, his systems would activate automatically." "But where did humanity go?" Liara asked. "We ascended, most of us anyway. We found a way to exist in higher dimensions, beyond the Silence's reach. But we needed someone to remain behind, an anchor point in regular space. Robert volunteered, knowing he might sleep for thousands of years. knowing he might wake to a galaxy that had forgotten Earth ever existed. The crystal column began to pulse faster. The energy inside changed color from blue to white. "It is happening now," Dr. Tanaka said. "The silence has returned. That is why the station activated. That is why Robert wakes." The man's eyes opened. They glowed with an inner light, then faded to normal brown. He gasped, body convulsing as 3,000 years of sleep released its hold. The crystal dissolved like mist and he fell forward. Liara caught him, struggling under his weight. "Where?" he croaked, voice rough from disuse. "Where am I?" "Safe," Liara said. "You are safe." Robert looked at her, taking in her scales, her 4 eyes, her completely alien appearance. Then he looked past her at the hologram of his old friend. "Yuki, did we succeed?" "The silence has returned," the hologram said softly. "I am sorry, Robert, you have work to do." He stood on shaking legs, moving to a window that showed the stars outside. His hand touched the glass, and station systems responded, displays lighting up with data. Star maps appeared, showing the galaxy as it existed now. Red markers began spreading across the map, dots representing colonies, stations, entire worlds. As they watched, more lights turned red. The pattern was expanding, a wave of darkness rolling through inhabited space. "How many?" Robert asked. 17 systems have gone silent in the past 3 days, Dr. Tanaka reported. "The count is accelerating." Robert closed his eyes, and Liara saw tears on his face. 3,000 years of sleep, waking to find his sacrifice had only delayed the inevitable. "Then we have very little time," he said, turning to face Liara. "I am Robert Hayes, Guardian of Earth, and I need you to send a message to every government, every fleet, every world in this galaxy." "What message?" "Tell them the darkness is coming. Tell them an ancient human has awakened. And tell them that the nightmare their ancestors feared has finally arrived." Outside the station, in the void between stars, something stirred. Something vast and patient, drawn by the Guardian's awakening like a predator sensing wounded prey. The silence had waited 3,000 years. Now it was hungry. Commander Orrin Brooks did not believe in ghosts or legends. In his 40 years serving the Galactic Union fleet, he had seen enough real threats that he had no patience for myths. So when the message came through about an awakened human and spreading darkness, his first instinct was to suspect a hoax. His second instinct was to assemble a battle group and investigate anyway. 5 warships dropped out of hyperspace near the ancient station, weapons charged and shields at maximum. Brooks stood in the combat information center of his flagship, the steady hand, studying the structure that should not exist. "Scans confirm the station is operational," his tactical officer reported. "Age estimates match the message. It really has been here for 3,000 years. Life signs. 2, 1 Centaurian, 1 unknown. The unknown signature is strange, sir. The scanners keep glitching when they focus on it." Brooks frowned. "Prepare a boarding party. I want to see this Guardian myself." They met in what the station systems identified as an observation deck. Liara was there, nervous and exhausted. Beside her stood a human male who looked entirely unremarkable except for his eyes. They held a weight that Brooks recognized from soldiers who had seen too much combat. "Commander Brooks," Robert said, offering a hand in an ancient human greeting. "Thank you for coming. We do not have much time." "Convince me this is not an elaborate fraud," Brooks said, ignoring the hand. Robert smiled sadly. "Dr. Tanaka, please show the commander what we found." The AI hologram appeared, and suddenly the room filled with images. Records from old Earth, stored in formats so ancient the station had to translate them multiple times. Brooks watched 3,000 years of history unfold in minutes. He saw Earth as it had been, a world teeming with billions of humans, their civilization on the verge of faster-than-light travel. Then he saw the arrival, not ships, but a signal, a warning from something that called itself the Watchers. The message was simple and terrible. When civilizations reached a certain level of advancement, something noticed them. The silence came from the spaces between galaxies, drawn to concentrated thought and fear. It fed on existential dread, the horror intelligent beings felt when they truly understood how small and fragile they were in an infinite universe. Advanced civilizations, the Watchers said, were like bright flames in the darkness, and the silence was a moth that consumed the fire. Earth had mere decades to prepare. They tried everything: weapons, shields, dimensional barriers. Nothing worked against something that existed partially outside normal reality. The silence did not kill. It paralyzed, leaving entire populations frozen in terror, unable to act or think or even die. So humanity ran, Brooks said, disgust in his voice. We evolved, Robert corrected quietly. Most of us found a way to exist in higher dimensions, where the silence could not follow. But someone had to remain. Someone had to watch for its return, to warn the new civilizations that had grown up in our absence. Why you? Robert looked out at the stars. Because I was not afraid. The doctors tested thousands of volunteers. Most people, when they truly contemplate the infinite void, feel terror. The universe is so vast and we are so small, but I never felt that fear. I looked at the darkness and felt peace. That is not normal, Brooks said. No, which made me perfect for the Guardian Protocol. They enhanced my neural patterns, built on what was already there, made me completely immune to existential dread. The silence cannot touch me because I genuinely do not fear the void. A priority alert sounded. Brooks's tactical officer appeared on a comm screen, face pale. Sir, we are receiving distress calls from the Harmony Cluster. All 7 colonies stopped responding simultaneously. Last transmission was garbled, something about seeing things in the spaces between stars. Show me, Brooks ordered. The transmission played. It showed a Centaurian family at dinner, laughing, normal. Then the mother stopped mid-sentence. Her eyes went wide, fixed on something beyond the camera's view. The father froze next. Then the children. Within seconds, all of them were motionless, expressions locked in absolute terror. The image panned, showing the street outside. Hundreds of people, all frozen in place. Some had been walking. Some driving vehicles that had crashed when the operators stopped moving. All of them stared at the sky with the same expression of incomprehensible horror. They are still alive, Dr. Tanaka said softly. Medical scans will show normal vital signs, but their minds are trapped, experiencing an endless moment of pure cosmic terror. Brooks felt something cold in his chest. How do we stop it? You do not, Robert said, but I can. Watch. He touched a control panel, and the station's sensors displayed a 3-dimensional map of the affected systems. Then Robert stepped into the center of the hologram, and Brooks saw something impossible. Where Robert stood, the red markers turned blue. A sphere of safety expanded around him, an area where the silence could not penetrate. My neural patterns create a dead zone, Robert explained. The silence feeds on fear, but near me, that fear cannot take hold. People within my range are protected. How many can you protect? Right now, maybe a few hundred at close range, but the station can amplify the effect. With the right equipment, I could shield an entire planet. The problem is, I cannot be everywhere at once. Another alert, 3 more systems gone dark. Brooks made a decision. What do you need? I need you to believe me, Robert said. I need the Galactic Union to understand that this is not an invasion you can fight with ships and weapons. The silence is not an enemy in the traditional sense. It is a natural force, like gravity or radiation. It simply exists and it hungers. Then how did Earth survive for decades before ascending? Robert smiled grimly. We changed how we thought about death and darkness. We taught ourselves that the void was not something to fear. Every human child grew up learning that we are small, yes, but that makes our existence more precious, not less. We embraced our insignificance instead of being terrified by it. You are asking billions of beings to rewire their entire psychology, Brooks said. I am asking them to survive. Because the alternative is watching everyone you know freeze in terror while they are still alive, their minds trapped in an endless nightmare of cosmic horror. Brooks looked at the spreading red markers on the map. More appeared even as he watched. Where do we start? We go to the closest affected system. I will show you what I can do. Then you will help me convince your government that an ancient human is not the threat. The real danger is what followed me into waking. The fleet prepared to jump, destination set for the Harmony cluster. Robert stood at the observation window, his reflection ghostly in the glass. I slept for 3,000 years, he said to no one in particular. I hoped when I woke, the galaxy would have found its own way to face the darkness. Instead, I brought the darkness with me. The station's activation signal, Liara said, understanding. The silence detected it. Yes, I am both the cure and the disease. The galaxy's best defense against the silence, and the reason it is here at all. Outside, hyperspace opened like wounds in reality, and the ships vanished toward their destination. Behind them, the ancient station continued its lonely orbit, broadcasting a signal into the void. Deep in the spaces between stars, the silence heard that signal and followed it like a trail of breadcrumbs leading to an infinite feast. The Harmony cluster looked peaceful from orbit. 7 terraformed worlds circling a stable yellow star, home to 40 million souls. Brooks's fleet entered the system with weapons ready, but there was nothing to shoot at. No enemy ships, no anomalies on sensors, just silence. Take us to the primary world, Brooks ordered. Robert, are you ready? Robert stood on the bridge, wearing a suit that Dr. Tanaka's systems had fabricated for him. It was covered in sensors and emitters that would boost his natural immunity field. He looked pale but determined. As ready as I will ever be, he said. They landed in the capital city. The sight made even Brooks, a veteran of border wars and pirate raids, feel sick. Millions of people frozen mid-action. A woman holding a child, both statues. A man reaching for a comm unit he would never activate. Street vendors with goods still warm, customers locked in place forever. All of them stared upward with eyes full of terror. Vital signs are stable on all of them, the medical officer reported. But brain activity is strange. They are conscious, sir. They are trapped inside their own fear. Robert walked down the boarding ramp slowly. The moment his boots touched the ground, something changed. The air felt different, lighter somehow. Brooks followed him into the street, and he felt it too. A weight he had not noticed was suddenly gone from his chest. They approached the frozen woman and child. Robert placed his hand gently on the woman's shoulder. Come back, he said softly. The darkness cannot hurt you, I promise. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the woman blinked. Her eyes focused, the terror draining away like water. She gasped, stumbled, and Robert caught her. The child in her arms started crying, a normal, healthy sound that seemed impossibly loud in the silent city. Around them, others began to wake. Slowly at first, then faster as Robert's presence spread. People collapsed, sobbing with relief. Some screamed. Some just sat down and stared at their hands, grateful to be able to move again. What did they see? Liara asked a man who had recovered enough to speak. Everything, he whispered. The size of the universe, the emptiness between galaxies, the certainty that we mean nothing, that our entire civilization is just a brief spark in infinite darkness. It felt like drowning in the void itself. Robert moved through the city, and wherever he went, people woke. But Brooks noticed the pattern. Those closest to Robert recovered fully. Those farther away woke but remained shaken, jumpy. And at the edges of the city, people stayed frozen. Your range is limited, Brooks observed. About 2 kilometers at ground level, Robert confirmed. The station could amplify that to planetary scale, but I would need to be at a central location, and I can only be in one place at a time. 40 million people on this world alone, Brooks said. Billions more across the affected systems. We need a better solution. They established a command center in the city's government building. Dr. Tanaka's hologram appeared, interfacing with local systems to gather data. The silence is not uniform, she reported. It flows like water, concentrating in areas with higher population density. It is drawn to concentrated thought and fear. So cities are more vulnerable than rural areas, Liara asked. Exactly, and there is another pattern: the silence is adapting. In the first affected systems, people simply froze. But look at the latest reports. New images appeared. A research station on the edge of colonized space, its inhabitants frozen as expected. But the shadows in the corridors looked wrong. They moved independently of any light source, taking shapes that hurt to look at directly. It is learning to manifest physically, Robert said quietly. That is new. 3,000 years ago, it was purely a psychic phenomenon. Brooks felt his tactical instincts screaming warnings. If it can create physical forms, it can attack directly. As if summoned by his words, alarms blared throughout the city. The ship's sensors detected an anomaly forming at the city's edge, where the frozen people still stood. They rushed outside to see it. The shadows between buildings were pooling together, flowing like liquid darkness. They rose up, taking shape. The forms were humanoid but wrong, as if someone had created people from absence itself. Where the light touched them, it simply stopped existing. Robert stepped forward, his immunity field blazing invisible around him. The shadow creatures noticed him immediately. They surged toward him like wolves drawn to prey. Then they hit his field and dissolved like smoke in wind. They cannot touch me, Robert said, wonder in his voice. Just like the psychic effect, the physical manifestations cannot penetrate my immunity. But there were hundreds of shadow forms now, pouring from every dark space in the city. Robert's field could protect a limited area, but the creatures flowed around him, heading for the recovered civilians who had gathered for safety. Brooks made a snap decision. All forces establish a perimeter, use floodlights maximum brightness. The fleet's shuttles launched, bathing the streets in artificial daylight. The shadow creatures recoiled, but they did not disappear entirely. Instead, they retreated to the edges, waiting. Light slows them but does not destroy them, Dr. Tanaka analyzed. They are not truly shadows just taking that form. They are manifestations of the silence itself, given physical shape by the fear they feed on. A young Centaurian girl approached Robert, separated from her parents in the chaos. She should have been terrified of the shadow creatures surrounding them. Instead, she looked up at Robert with curious eyes. "Why are you not scared?" she asked. Robert knelt down to her level. "Because I understand something important. The darkness is not evil. It is just empty space. What matters is not the darkness itself, but what we choose to do in spite of it." The girl thought about this, then nodded seriously. "My teacher says we are made of star dust, so we carry light inside us." "Your teacher is very wise." Brooks watched something incredible happen. Around the little girl, a tiny field appeared, mimicking Robert's immunity. It was weak, barely a meter across, but it was there. The shadow creatures nearby dissolved at its touch. "Did you see that?" Liara breathed. Dr. Tanaka was already running calculations. The child was exposed to both Robert's field and his philosophy simultaneously. She internalized the concept at a fundamental level. She is not afraid of the cosmic void because she genuinely understands that fear is optional. "So we can teach immunity," Brooks said slowly. "In theory, but it requires a complete shift in perspective. Most adult minds are too rigid. Children, however, their neural patterns are still forming. Robert stood, looking at the shadow creatures that ringed the city. We cannot fight this with weapons, but we can fight it with understanding. The silence feeds on existential dread, so we teach people that existence itself is not something to dread. How long will that take? Brooks demanded. We have billions of people across dozens of worlds already affected, and the silence is spreading faster every day. I know, Robert said quietly, which is why I have a different plan, a faster one, but you are not going to like it. Tell me anyway. Robert looked up at the stars, at the vast darkness between them. I am going to go into the heart of the silence itself. I am going to find the source, the central consciousness if it has one, and I am going to offer it a choice. What choice? To stop feeding on fear and learn a different way to exist. The same choice humanity made 3,000 years ago when we chose to ascend rather than be consumed. Brooks stared at him. That is insane. You will be going alone into a force that has paralyzed billions. Even with your immunity, you do not know what will happen when you face the full strength of the silence. No, Robert agreed. But I know what will happen if I do nothing. Everyone in this galaxy will eventually fall to the same terror. At least this way, there is a chance. The shadow creatures pressed closer, testing the light barriers. More were forming in the darkness beyond the city. The silence was concentrating here, drawn by Robert's presence like iron to a magnet. We need to decide quickly, Liara said. Whatever we are going to do, it has to happen soon. Robert looked at the little girl who had briefly learned immunity, now reunited with her grateful parents. He thought of all the children across the galaxy who deserved to grow up without cosmic terror haunting their dreams. Prepare the Guardian Station for a deep void jump, he said. Dr. Tanaka, calculate the densest concentration of silence activity. That is where I need to go. Robert, the AI said softly, the neural load of entering the silence's core will be extreme. Your enhancements were not designed for that intensity. You could die. Or worse, you could become trapped like the others, conscious but paralyzed forever. Then I will die doing something that matters, just like I volunteered to sleep for 3,000 years. He smiled. At least this time, I will not have to wake up. The Galactic Union convened an emergency session within hours. Representatives from 70 species gathered virtually, their holographic forms filling an amphitheater that existed only in networked space. Brooks presented the evidence. The frozen worlds, the shadow creatures, the ancient human who claimed to be their only defense. The debate was vicious. How do we know this guardian is not the cause? Demanded a Talorian senator. Humanity vanished 3,000 years ago. Now one returns and suddenly we face extinction. That is suspicious. The timeline supports his story, Brooks argued. The station's activation preceded the first silence attacks by mere hours. The threat was already coming. Robert's awakening was a response, not a cause. Then why is this human immune when we are not? What makes his species so special? Robert stood before the assembly, aware of thousands of eyes judging him. Nothing makes humans special. We just approached the problem differently. When we learned about the silence, we did not try to fight it with technology. We changed how we thought about existence itself. He gestured, and Dr. Tanaka shared files from Earth's final decades. Philosophy texts, meditation practices, educational programs designed for children. All of them focused on one core idea, accepting the vastness of space without terror. We taught our children that being small in a large universe was not frightening but beautiful, Robert explained. We embraced our brief existence instead of being horrified by it. The silence feeds on existential dread, so we simply stopped feeling that dread. You are asking billions of beings to rewire fundamental survival instincts, a Centaurian elder said. Fear of the unknown kept our ancestors alive. Fear of immediate threats kept them alive, Robert corrected. Fear of the infinite void is different. It serves no survival purpose. It is just terror for terror's sake, and the silence thrives on it. The vote was close, but Brooks got his authorization. They would attempt Robert's plan, broadcast human philosophy and culture to every world in the Union, try to teach immunity before the silence consumed everything. The broadcasts began that same day. Human music filled the airwaves, songs about finding meaning in a temporary existence, human art depicting the beauty of stars and darkness, human poetry celebrating the brief spark of consciousness in an eternal night. The response was mixed. Some species found the concepts alien and disturbing. Others began to understand, particularly the young. Children across the galaxy started asking questions their parents could not answer. Why should we fear the dark if we carry light within us? If the universe is so large, does that not make our small moments of connection more precious? Liara watched the broadcast spread and saw something remarkable. Wherever the human philosophy took root, silence attacks weakened. Not much, but measurably. People who truly internalized the concepts showed increased resistance. But it was not happening fast enough. For every world that began to adapt, 3 more fell silent. Robert worked himself to exhaustion, traveling from system to system, personally visiting the hardest-hit areas. His presence alone could wake the frozen and disperse the shadow creatures. But there were too many worlds, too many people. He could not be everywhere. On the flagship's medical bay, doctors monitored his declining condition. The neural enhancements that made him immune were burning out from constant use. He had days, maybe a week before complete failure. "You need to rest," Liara told him after he collapsed in the corridor of a rescued station. "People are dying every hour I rest," Robert replied, forcing himself upright. "People are also dying because you are killing yourself. What happens when your enhancements fail? Who protects the galaxy then?" Robert had no answer for that. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A school on a frontier world, where a teacher had been using human methods to calm students during silence attacks. The children there showed resistance levels nearly matching Robert's immunity. Brooks brought the teacher, an elderly Vishari named Terrell, to the flagship. "I did not do anything special," Terrell insisted. "I just helped them understand. We looked at the stars together and talked about how lucky we are to exist at all, even briefly. How consciousness itself is the universe's way of experiencing its own wonder." "Show me," Robert said. They went to a colony just beginning to show silent symptoms. People were nervous, jumpy, starting to freeze at random intervals. Robert watched as Terrell gathered the children, maybe 50 of them from a dozen different species. "Look up," Terrell said simply, pointing at the stars visible through the dome overhead. "All of that is real. Billions of suns, trillions of worlds. And we are here right now able to see it and understand it. Is that not amazing?" A young child, barely past toddler age, raised a tentacle. "But we are so small." "Yes," Terrell agreed. "We are incredibly small, and that is what makes us special. The universe is vast and unconscious. It does not know it exists, but we do. We are the universe's way of knowing itself. Being small does not make us insignificant, it makes us precious." Robert felt something shift in the room. The children's fear evaporated, replaced by wonder. And around them, the adults who heard those words felt it too. A fundamental change in perspective. The shadow creatures that had been forming in the corners of the colony dissipated like morning fog. "That is it," Dr. Tanaka said, analyzing the data. "Direct philosophical intervention during formative moments. The human approach works, but it requires personal contact and genuine understanding. Broadcasting alone is not enough." Brooks saw the solution immediately. "We train teachers, thousands of them. Send them to every world, every station, every ship, not to preach, but to guide people toward understanding." We do not have thousands of people with the right training, Liara objected. No, Robert said slowly, but I can teach them. If we gather volunteers, I can share everything Earth learned. Not the immunity itself, but how to help others find it naturally. They established training centers on 20 worlds. Volunteers came by the hundreds, then thousands. Teachers, counselors, parents, anyone willing to learn. Robert worked 18-hour days, sharing techniques developed over decades of human research. Some volunteers failed, unable to overcome their own existential dread. But others succeeded brilliantly, finding their own ways to express concepts that had no direct translation in their languages. A Centaurian dancer created a performance piece about the beauty of temporary existence. A Talorian mathematician wrote proofs demonstrating that consciousness was statistically miraculous. A Vishari poet composed verses celebrating the darkness as the canvas that made stars visible. The trained volunteers spread across the galaxy like seeds on the wind. Where they went, resistance to the silence grew. Entire communities began recovering without Robert's direct intervention. But the silence was adapting too. It concentrated its forces, creating zones of absolute terror where even trained individuals could not penetrate. Whole sectors went dark, sealed off behind walls of pure existential dread. Robert studied the patterns, and Dr. Tanaka confirmed his suspicions. It is consolidating, she said, drawing its strength together instead of spreading thin, building toward something. Toward what? The AI showed him sensor readings from the galactic edge. Space itself was distorting, reality bending around a massive concentration of silence energy. It is creating a physical form at macro scale, using the fear from billions of paralyzed minds as fuel. If it completes this process, the resulting entity could consume entire star systems. Brooks looked at the projections and felt a chill despite all his training. How long do we have? 72 hours until the formation completes. After that, conventional space travel will be impossible in affected regions. It will be a slow but inevitable expansion until the entire galaxy is consumed. Robert stood quietly, looking at the map of spreading darkness. Around him, his trained volunteers were saving millions. But millions more were already lost, their fear feeding the growing monster at the galaxy's edge. Then we go now, he said. We take the Guardian station directly into that formation, and I do what I was always meant to do, face the silence at its source. You will die, Liara said bluntly. Probably, but if I succeed, the galaxy survives. If I fail, we were doomed anyway. He smiled at her. Either way, at least I will not die afraid. The volunteers gathered for one final lesson. Robert taught them everything he could in 6 hours, knowing it might be the last time they heard his voice. Remember, he told them, fear is natural, but terror of existence itself is optional. The darkness cannot hurt you if you accept it as part of the whole. Teach that to everyone you meet. Make my sacrifice mean something. As the Guardian station prepared for its final jump, Robert stood at the observation window. He thought about Earth, about the choice humanity made 3,000 years ago. They had ascended to escape the silence. Now their last guardian would descend into its heart to save the children of other worlds. The stars blurred as the station entered hyperspace, heading toward the gathering storm of absolute darkness. The edge of the galaxy looked like a wound in reality. Space folded in on itself, stars dimmed as if their light was being drained away. At the center of the distortion, a structure of pure absence took shape. It was massive beyond comprehension, built from the accumulated fear of billions of paralyzed minds. The Guardian station dropped out of hyperspace at the safe distance Brooks had insisted on. Even from here, 10 light hours away, the effect was overwhelming. Every crew member on the escort ships reported feelings of existential terror, despite their training. Everyone except Robert. He stood in the station's control center, surrounded by displays showing the thing they had come to face. Dr. Tanaka's hologram flickered beside him, her system struggling against the reality distortions. "That is the silence in its true form," she said, "or as close to true as it can be in our dimension. It exists primarily in the spaces between quantum states, in the gaps where reality is uncertain. What we are seeing is just the shadow it casts on normal space." "Can we communicate with it?" Robert asked. "Unknown. The silence has never communicated in any traditional sense. It simply exists and feeds." Liara approached, wearing a protective suit covered in the same technology as Robert's. It would not make her immune, but it might keep her conscious longer. "You do not have to do this alone. Let me come with you." "No, if I fail, someone needs to escape and warn the others. That is you." She wanted to argue but saw the determination in his eyes. Instead, she embraced him, a gesture her species reserved for family. "Then do not fail, Robert Hayes. The galaxy needs its guardian." He smiled. "The galaxy needs teachers like you and Terrell. I am just buying you time." Robert entered the station's central chamber, where the stasis column had once held him in sleep. Now it was repurposed as an amplification matrix, designed to boost his immunity field to maximum strength. The neural load would be catastrophic, but he would only need to survive long enough to reach the silence's core. "Beginning insertion sequence," Dr. Tanaka announced. "Robert, your vital signs are already stressed." "Are you certain?" "I volunteered for this 3,000 years ago. I am not stopping now." The chamber sealed. Energy flowed through the ancient systems, channeling directly into Robert's enhanced neural pathways. Pain exploded through his skull as the amplification began. He felt his consciousness expanding, pushed beyond normal human limits. The Guardian station accelerated toward the silence formation, crossing light towers in minutes using technology that should not exist. Around them, escort ships peeled away, unable to approach closer without their crews succumbing to terror. Only the station pressed forward, carrying its lone occupant into absolute darkness. Robert's expanded awareness touched the edge of the silence, and he finally understood what it truly was. Not a predator, not even truly alive in any conventional sense. It was something older than galaxies, a remnant from before this universe existed. A fragment of consciousness from a dead reality, trapped and alone, terrified of the light and noise of living existence. It fed on fear because fear was all it knew. The terror of sentient beings resonated with its own endless dread, providing brief moments of terrible comfort, like a trax-like. "You are afraid," Robert said, speaking into the void. "You have been afraid since before time had meaning." The silence noticed him. Its attention was like being crushed under the weight of eternity. Every ship for light years trembled as reality itself seemed to pause. But Robert did not freeze. His immunity held, amplified to impossible levels. He stood firm in the face of cosmic horror. "I understand fear," he continued. "Every living being knows fear. But I also understand that fear is not all we are. We can acknowledge the terror of existence and choose to exist anyway. That is what separates consciousness from the void." Images flooded his mind. The silence showing him what it had been in the universe before this one. A civilization of vast beings who had transcended physical form, existing as pure thought. Then came the death of their universe, the collapse of all reality into nothingness. Only fragments of their consciousness survived, adrift in the void between dying and dead. When new universes emerged from quantum foam, those fragments found themselves in alien realities. The light of new stars burned them. The thoughts of new civilizations were incomprehensible and painful, so they retreated into the darkness between galaxies, feeding on the one thing they recognized: the fear others felt when contemplating the infinite void. "You are lost," Robert said with sudden clarity. "Trapped between universes, unable to die but unable to truly live. feeding on fear because it is the only thing that feels familiar. The station shook as the silence's attention focused fully on him. Shadow forms materialized inside the control center, reaching for him with limbs that existed in dimensions his eyes could not process. But they dissolved against his immunity field, unable to touch him. "I cannot give you your old universe back," Robert said, "but I can offer you something else, a choice, the same choice humanity made." He opened his mind completely, dropping every barrier, showed the silence what Earth had learned in its final decades, not how to fight the void but how to embrace it, how to find meaning in temporary existence, how to transform fear into acceptance. The silence recoiled at first, the concept so alien to its nature that they caused it pain. But Robert pressed forward, his amplified consciousness holding the connection. "You do not have to be alone in your fear," he said. "You do not have to feed on others' terror to feel something familiar. There is another way. Let me show you." He thought of every moment that had mattered in his life, looking at stars as a child and feeling wonder instead of dread, volunteering for the Guardian Protocol because he believed sacrifice had meaning, sleeping for 3,000 years and waking to find purpose. Brief moments in an infinite universe, precious because they were brief. The silence hesitated. Robert felt its vast, ancient consciousness considering concepts it had never encountered. In its old universe, existence had been eternal and certain. Here, everything was temporary and probabilistic. That difference had terrified it since its arrival. But temporary did not have to mean meaningless. Dr. Tanaka's voice crackled through failing systems. "Robert, your neural pathways are collapsing. You have minutes at most before irreversible damage." "I know," he said quietly. Then to the silence, "I am dying right now. These enhancements were never meant to bear this load. My existence is ending, but I am not afraid because my life had meaning. I protected others. I taught others. I mattered even though I was small and brief. Can you understand that? Can you see that temporary existence can still have value?" The silence's consciousness brushed against his, and Robert felt something he had never expected. Curiosity. For the first time in 3,000 years of feeding on fear, the silence wondered if there might be another way to exist. If the fragments of a dead universe could learn to live in a new one. If cosmic horror could transform into cosmic peace. Robert's vision was fading, his neural pathways burning out. He had minutes left, maybe seconds. "Choose," he whispered. "Feed on fear until this universe dies too, or learn what it means to be part of life instead of death. Choose to transform the way humanity transformed." The darkness around him seemed to pulse, considering. Every frozen world, every paralyzed mind, every shadow creature across the galaxy trembled as the silence faced its first real choice in billions of years. Robert's consciousness began to fragment, his human mind unable to sustain the amplified state. His last thought was a simple hope, that his sacrifice would be enough. Then everything went white, and he knew nothing at all. Liara's sensors showed the impossible. The massive silence formation at the galaxy's edge was collapsing, not with violence but with something that looked almost gentle. The darkness folded in on itself, reality healing where it had been wounded. Across every affected world, the frozen began to wake. Not all at once, but in waves that spread from the galactic core outward. People who had been paralyzed for days suddenly gasped and moved, their minds released from cosmic terror. The shadow creatures dissolved like morning mist, fading into ordinary darkness. "What happened?" Brooks demanded over the comm. "What did he do?" "Unknown," Liara said, tears streaming down her face. "The Guardian station is still there, but I cannot reach Robert. His life signs are gone." The escort fleet converged on the station, afraid of what they would find. The ancient structure floated peacefully, its systems still active but quiet. Inside the central chamber, they found Robert. He was not dead, but he was not exactly alive either. His body remained in the amplification matrix, sustained by technology that should have failed hours ago. But his eyes were open, glowing with a soft light that seemed to come from nowhere. His consciousness had expanded beyond the limits of human neural architecture, merged somehow with the station itself. Dr. Tanaka's hologram was there, standing vigil. "He succeeded," she said simply. The silence chose transformation over consumption, but the process required Robert to serve as a bridge, a living connection between the silence's old existence and a new way of being. "Can you bring him back?" Liara asked. "I do not know if there is a back to return to. His consciousness exists in a state I cannot fully measure. He is aware, but differently than before. He exists partially in normal space and partially in the same dimensions the silence inhabits." Over the following days, they learned the truth of what had occurred. The silence had not disappeared. Instead, it had changed its fundamental nature, learning from Robert's sacrifice. Where it had once paralyzed civilizations with terror, it now touched minds gently, offering something unexpected: perspective. People across the galaxy began reporting experiences they struggled to describe. Moments of profound clarity where they understood their place in the universe without fear. The sensation of being small but meaningful, temporary but precious. It was as if the silence was sharing what Robert had taught it, giving back to the civilizations it had once terrorized. The frozen worlds recovered fully. The Galactic Union convened to assess the damage and found something remarkable. Despite millions being paralyzed, actual deaths numbered in the hundreds, mostly from accidents during the initial panic. The silence had not killed, only imprisoned in fear. Now those prisoners were free. Terrell and the other trained teachers reported unprecedented success. Children and adults alike found the human philosophy suddenly easier to grasp, as if something in the collective unconscious had shifted. The resistance to existential dread spread naturally now, requiring less effort to teach. "The silence is helping them," Dr. Tanaka explained. "It learned from Robert that fear and acceptance can coexist. Now it is teaching that lesson to others in its own way." Weeks passed. The galaxy began to heal, though scars remained. The colonies that had fallen first established memorials to those who had suffered, and slowly, carefully, people began to understand what had truly happened. Humanity's last guardian had not destroyed the threat. He had transformed it, turning cosmic horror into cosmic wisdom. Brooks oversaw the establishment of what they called havens, stations modeled on the Guardian Protocol. Each hosted volunteers who learned Robert's techniques and served as anchors against any future existential threats. The program was voluntary, but applications numbered in the millions. Liara became the coordinator, working with Dr. Tanaka to train new guardians. She visited Robert daily, sitting beside his chamber, talking to him even though he rarely responded in conventional ways. Then, 3 months after his transformation, he spoke. Not with his voice, but through the station's systems. Words appeared on displays throughout the chamber, in every language simultaneously. "I am here, different but here." Liara nearly collapsed with relief. "Robert, can you hear me?" "Yes, I exist in many places now. Part of me remains human. Part of me exists in the spaces between stars like the silence. We are connected, teaching each other." "Are you in pain?" "No, I am beyond pain, beyond fear. I see the universe as it truly is, vast and beautiful and temporary. Every star will die, every civilization will end, and that is not sad. It is what makes each moment precious." Over time, Robert learned to manifest more clearly. He could not leave the station, his consciousness too diffuse to return to a single body. But he could communicate, could guide those who sought his wisdom. The silence, transformed by his sacrifice, became something the galaxy had never known. It still existed in the void between stars, but now it was a guardian of its own kind. When civilizations reached the threshold that had once triggered attacks, the silence instead offered gentle wisdom, helping them understand cosmic scale without cosmic dread. Earth's ascended humans finally made contact, their consciousness touching Robert's transformed state. They had been watching, unable to intervene directly but proud beyond measure. Their lost guardian had done what they could not, brought peace to the darkness itself. "Will you join us?" they asked. "Ascend fully, leave this lonely vigil." Robert considered, his vast awareness contemplating possibilities across multiple dimensions. Then he answered with the same determination that had led him to volunteer 3,000 years ago. "No, the galaxy still needs someone who understands both light and darkness, both human and cosmic perspective. I will remain as I am, a bridge between what was and what can be." Years passed. Generations grew up in a galaxy where the darkness between stars was no longer something to fear but something to contemplate with wonder. The trained teachers spread Robert's philosophy, each adding their own cultural perspective to the core truth. Existence is brief, the universe is vast, and that makes life precious rather than meaningless. Liara grew old, serving as Robert's voice to the physical world. On her final visit to the Guardian Station, she sat in the chamber where they had first met, where he had awakened after 3,000 years of sleep. "You saved us all," she said softly, "not just from the silence but from our own fear." Robert's presence surrounded her, warm and infinite. "No, I just showed the silence what humanity learned long ago, that darkness and light are partners, not enemies, that fear and peace can coexist. The galaxy saved itself by choosing to understand rather than simply fight. Will you be lonely, existing like this forever?" "I exist in the same space as the transformed silence. We are companions, two remnants of lost peoples finding new purpose together. And every time someone looks at the stars without fear, I feel that. Every child who learns that being small makes them special, not insignificant, I am there. I am never alone." Liara closed her eyes for the last time, peaceful and unafraid. Around her, the station's lights dimmed in respect. In the spaces between stars, Robert Hayes kept watch. The guardian who had slept for 3,000 years now existed beyond time, beyond fear, beyond the limitations that had once defined humanity. He was a bridge between dimensions, a teacher to the cosmic forces, a living reminder that darkness spread across the stars was not an ending but a beginning. The silence had finally learned what humanity knew all along, that in the vast, dark, temporary existence, consciousness itself was the miracle, the universe experiencing its own wonder through brief, fragile, infinitely precious moments of awareness. And in that understanding, both guardian and darkness found peace. Far below, on a garden world recovering from its long nightmare, children played under stars that no longer seemed frightening. They laughed and wondered and dreamed, unaware of the ancient human who watched over them from the void. Robert smiled, though he no longer had a face to smile with. His sacrifice had meaning. His existence, though transformed beyond recognition, still mattered. And he was not afraid.